Hey, welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Watching the Watchers is a show that we do to monitor police misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, judicial misconduct, anything that is involved in the law enforcement system, anybody who's involved in the justice system. We want to hold them accountable. We've got a lot of really bad people masquerading as good people, and they're doing it behind a badge and a gun. And unfortunately, they get away with too much. We're not going to allow that to happen on this show. I showed you previously this slide. This is in my office. I keep mugshots and photographs of all of the bad people who are littered throughout our criminal justice system, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We've got a pretty packed show. There's a lot that's going on throughout the world, and so let me give you kind of a quick overview on what we're going to be covering today. First and foremost, we're going to discuss the headlines. We've got some news that we need to talk about. Governor Ducey just had a press conference, and we've got some more information about what he's going to be doing. So we're going to talk about that. We've got a pretty awesome guy who's going to be joining us today at 4:30 here on the live show. His name is Jimmy Jenkins. He's a reporter with KJZZ. He's doing some incredible work with the reporting on the coronavirus, COVID-19, and specifically how it's impacting our jails and our prison system. So he's going to join us today. We're going to talk to him. And then finally, of course, we're going to get to some seriously bad popo. This is everybody's favorite part of the broadcast, the bad popo segment. This is where we actually call these officers out, call these people out, hold up their names. The reason being we want to sort of create a little bit of a movement here. When we see this stuff, we want to call it out and utilize public support, public opinion, public voice, public sentiment to go out there and really bring some justice to some of the things that are not so just going on in our society. So we're going to get to a lot of it today. Let's start off with the headlines. So before we dive into the material, the news is moving so fast, it's really difficult to stay on top of it. We just heard from Governor Ducey in Arizona, who had a press conference that lasted about an hour. It may still be going on. I had to hop off at about 40 minutes into it. He's always doing his press conferences right at 3 o'clock, right before the show. So if anybody has Governor Ducey's ear, can you tell him that it's inconvenient for this show? We would prefer that he move it to a different time so that I don't have to be interrupted in my show prep. So if you've got his word on that, you can send that over to his office. Now, the press conference was mostly useless from my understanding of it, from what I heard. There may have been some additional guidance that came out of his office today, but we just haven't seen it yet. So basically the big takeaway, the big headline, and Governor Ducey even said as much, was that he's going to allow elective surgeries to reopen again. So we can now go have some elective surgeries. It was really interesting that he noted that we are on the 22nd of April now, and we're about to come to the end of the order. The stay in place order was set to expire on April 30th. So we've got 8 days, and we've got no direction from our governor as to what's going to be happening after that 8 days. It's kind of ridiculous that we're sort of flying here without any direction, but that's what our government does. So we don't have any idea what's going to happen on the 30th, as far as I know. Jimmy Jenkins, like I said, is going to be here on the second hour. We'll see if he has any insight to that. But the Governor Ducey's press conference left a lot to be said. There was not really a lot of good, actionable information at that time, which is unfortunate. There's a lot of small businesses, ours included, a lot of people who want to know, what's the next step? What's the plan? We can't plan. We can't plan to, to hire people or, fire people or expand or shrink or what the heck is going to be happening here. So it's very frustrating from a small business owner, very frustrating for our clients. People have criminal court cases and pending legal matters that just are not being addressed right now, which is obviously causing them a lot of anxiety. And so there is a lot that we need to decipher through. I thought that we were going to have some guidance and some direction from our governor today, but we do not. So we'll just have to keep our ears open and see what else is coming out of their office. There are some other interesting developments, though, across the country. So we've been talking a lot about coronavirus, COVID-19, and at the very beginning of this sort of outbreak back in March 13th, when the governor was starting to talk about, the stay-in-place order, when the federal government said we're going to do, it's going to declare a national emergency on March 13th, I believe it was. something that I've been hounding here on this show was we want less people in and more people out. And of course, I'm talking about being in custody. We want less people going into custody. We want more people coming out of custody. And so it is something that I think is reasonable. It's rational. I think a lot of people are moving in that direction, but some cities and some states are not. Arizona is one of them. I've covered it on the show multiple times that our governor and, well, not Doug Ducey specifically, but his spokesman actually came out and said that they are not going to be considering releasing people. Other locations are releasing people out of custody. Arizona has just made the decision that they're not going to do that. However, we're seeing some progress in other parts of the country, in other areas. This one comes from federal court. So a judge orders ICE, which is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, to consider releasing all immigrants at risk of dying if infected by the coronavirus. So that's a pretty big statement. If at risk of dying from the coronavirus, that is a big net that covers a lot of people. Some other states are a little bit more restrictive. They say things like, yeah, you got to be over 55 or over 65, and so that headline's pretty big. That article comes from CBS. Now there is some additional additional information about that, but this was written by Camilo Montoya Galvez from CBS News, April 20th. Basically, a federal judge has ordered that ICE is now going to be reviewing all cases, reviewing them rapidly, and making moves to get these people out of custody very quickly. So a little bit from the article, you can see there's kind of a lot of text here, but federal judge said that ICE is now ordered to start making these moves. I was reading this article, and if you remember back in the 2016 election, President Trump had some really choice words about a federal judge who was making some immigration policy decisions, and he sort of called that judge out and received a ton of backlash for it. He was basically implying that the judge had some sort of bias because of the fact that the judge had a Hispanic name. Therefore, the judge was ruling against his immigration proposal or interfering with that in a way solely due to his ethnicity. And then, of course, it came out that it has nothing to do with it. And of course, it doesn't. So when I was reading this article, I was thinking, okay, well, Trump just issued a 60-day sort of moratorium on immigration into the United States. We've seen pictures come around of borders being closed. And of course, I'm not an immigration attorney, so I can't really speak to what's going on. I know there's been some exclusions in terms of, H-1B visas and F-1 visas. Those things are still going to be allowed. But by and large, the federal government is really restricting immigration. So when we go to this article and we see that Judge Jesus actually was the one who made this ruling, I was sort of anticipating that we were going to see a Trump tweet storm sort of blasting, all of this stuff going on. But the long and short of it is that there's some very strict time requirements. So in the next 10 days or within the first 5 days of detention for future detainees, ICE is required. They need to make timely custody determinations for these people, which is very fast. I mean, things move pretty slowly in a lot of these different agencies, and so the fact that a federal judge, which is it's a big judge, it's in federal court, if they're making these proclamations, it's a pretty good indicator that they see this as a big problem. And why wouldn't they? Coronavirus cases among more than 31,000 immigrants held by ICE surged to 220 cases on Monday, with the agency reporting 96 new cases across the country, and that's according to a notification that was obtained by CBS News. So that's a lot of people. And, I've been speaking a lot with other defense lawyers, people who are sort of in similar situations across the country, and they're telling me that their numbers are exploding. So currently in Arizona, our total number of people who are in custody that have tested positive for coronavirus is low in comparison to some other places. Jimmy Jenkins is going to come on and he's going to talk about that. I've got some of his numbers in an article that we're going to get to. But the point is that once sort of the barrier is breached in these facilities, once a guard or an inmate, somebody catches coronavirus, it spreads like extremely rapidly, like wildfire, and everybody ends up getting it. I was on a call this week earlier, and there was something like 2,000 people in a prison back east who all had tested positive for coronavirus. So they're further ahead than we are. And my concern is that it's going to continue trending in that direction. So we're going to see more and more people who get it. It's going to spread a lot more quickly, and there's going to be some pretty serious repercussions for that. So we've got some precedent. The point of this story is that we've got some precedent. We're seeing more and more of a drip of other governments, other localities opening up and actually releasing people, saying that they're going to modify their orders so that they can go out of custody and get treatment. So it's positive. It's going in the right direction. I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more of that here in Arizona. I'm not real sure that we're going to see that, but we'll talk to Jimmy about that here in a little bit. Back to the article, the order also requires ICE to define and implement minimum acceptable detention conditions for all detainees with risk factors that have been defined. So there's a lot there. It's good news. I think it's something that's going on in the right direction, but we'll see if that stays or what the different policy adjustments are. While we're talking about immigration, we're seeing more and more officers, more and more police departments and different agencies sort of respond to this popular sentiment that is now coming out that the lockdown is overly burdensome, it's unfair, it's unjust, it's unconstitutional. We have the freedom of assembly, we have the freedom of association, we can go out and do these things, and the government requiring us to be on lockdown is an unconstitutional infringement on our rights. And I have a lot of sympathy for that argument. So we're seeing more and more people protest and go out in public. Now, I don't know that that's the best way to do that, to voice your displeasure, but it is one alternative. And I can empathize a lot with these people who've lost their jobs. They have no idea what to do. They're very angry. The federal government has promised help for small businesses and for individuals alike. And they sort of have dropped the ball for everything. The funding for small businesses, part of the CARES Act and so on, were all depleted like instantly because everybody needed money. Everybody, was relying on cash flow. And so it was a big problem. So if these people are out, then they're upset. I can empathize with that. But the question then becomes, what is an acceptable sort of allowable government interference with our day-to-day life? And we're starting to see more and more police officers pop up. We have a story that we're going to cover today about a gal in Idaho who was arrested and, for sort of protesting and appearing at a park. It's gone viral. It's making headlines across the country. We're going to talk about that here at the end of the show in the Bad Popo segment. But what we're seeing is this law enforcement response kind of everywhere, kind of across the board. And so the next article comes from it's also an immigration story, and it comes from Tucson, Arizona. And what we're looking at here is the Border Patrol is appearing at different immigration centers. So the article is Border Patrol presence at COVID-19 drive-through raises questions. There's been this issue that people are going to get tested, and ICE is actually having their vehicles at these different locations. And so this is a problem because it's very similar, it's very analogous to what we experience in criminal law. When we're talking about immigration, we're talking about immigrants who are sort of in this, quasi status, depending on what state they're in, depending on how their local governments are treating them as a person, as a non-citizen. Some, California has some sort of lax rules. You can get a driver's license there and apply for certain benefits. Arizona is a little bit more strict on those things. So if you're now saying, well, what is the relationship between the Border Patrol and COVID-19 testing and health services? And I mean, not really. I don't know why there would be a real strong need for ICE to be present where people are getting tested for coronavirus, but for some reason they're there. They actually had a vehicle there, and there's a lot of back and forth in this article. So it comes from Central Arizona News, and the Immigration Customs Enforcement, they're making these claims that they're just there encouraging people to get medical treatment, and they want to provide care for the people that need the care. When the counter side, the flip side of that, the ACLU and some local organizations are saying that this is really a pretty big dissuader. Immigrants are not going to want to come and get tested because of the presence of ICE. They're going to be concerned that if they go there and they try to do the right thing, to get tested, to be responsible, to be good person in dealing with everything that's going on. If there's an ICE vehicle there, they're just not going to be encouraged to go do that. So we're kind of pushing these people into the dark. Now, I have seen this argument made a lot in criminal law, and it's not a bad argument either. So sort of the analogy there is that when somebody is in a bad situation, so let's say it's a domestic violence situation. So we've got a husband, we've got a wife, and they're both non-documented, undocumented immigrants. They're non-citizens, and they get into an argument, and husband hits the spouse. Okay, it's kind of the standard, stereotypical domestic violence situation. The argument from a lot of the people in the sort of the immigrant advocate community, and from our perspective, this happens, is when that wife is injured, she is less likely to call the police because of the concern that the ICE immigration is now intertwined with the local law enforcement. So if this woman, calls the police, ICE may come and get her. Or if the police arrest her husband, then he's now going to be at risk of being deported. So this can be something that is a scary proposition. This woman, this family, they may want the husband to get some help. They want, maybe he's got a drinking problem. Maybe he just had a bad night and he needs some counseling. There are a lot of alternatives to that. But if he gets deported and the family is now left alone without somebody who's providing, a source of income or some stability, that's a big deal. That's worse than calling the police. So then that person doesn't call the police, and we start to see this cycle of perpetual abuse that is continuing. And so a lot of the immigration activists and people in the immigration law are concerned about when ICE appears. What are they doing here? Why do they need to be here? Are we really going to be going into coronavirus testing facilities and just rounding people up and throwing them out of the country at a time when we're all supposed to be sort of hunkered down and weathering the storm on this thing? Whether or not there is a clear answer on that, we're not going to get to that in this article. This article actually has a lot of back and forth. They're kind of angry at each other. So the ACLU and ICE, they're sort of throwing these quabbles back and forth. So this statement actually comes from ICE. They released a statement. They said that we understand that during this crisis, ICE will not carry out any operations at or near healthcare facilities such as hospitals, doctors' offices, blah, blah, blah. Except in the most extraordinary circumstances, individuals should not avoid seeking medical care because they fear civil immigration enforcement. So that's their statement from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement website. But then that, of course, begs the question, why are they there? Why are they showing up at these different facilities? Why are law enforcement officers showing up at businesses and at parks? What are they doing? Why is the government now becoming so sort of dictatorial in a certain sense that they're managing our lives and telling us what we can and cannot do? The ACLU and the Customs and Border Patrol said that part of our responsibility is assuring detainees receive medical treatment when needed. Seeing Border Patrol agents at a local hospital is normal. It's no different than seeing other law enforcement entities at a hospital. So they don't think it's a big deal, and that may be the case. That may be just somebody who was there picking up something. I don't know. But there's, of course, not a sort of acceptance of that explanation from Border Patrol, from the ACLU. ACLU of Arizona says that Border Patrol presence in hospitals could deter undocumented people from going to hospitals and getting tested, even if they're showing COVID-19-like symptoms. So now it's sort of presenting them with this choice. Is it between potential death or is it between getting deported, right? If they're not going to get tested, if they're not going to go to the hospitals and seek medical treatment, they're going to stay at home and potentially die. So it's a big concern. I think that it's something that we should certainly keep an eye on. I have not heard really any other stories of this, but it does it does sort of make you concerned about sort of a snowball, sort of creeping, slippery slope type of an effect. So that article was out. It was last updated, and we're basically going to keep an eye on it. We're going to see what ICE is doing, whether or not they're going to be executing the deportations, or really how the execution of President Trump's revised immigration executive order is going to trickle down here on the local level here in our state. So we'll stay on top of that. One couple final things here. Guzman said this Guzman fellow is from an undocumented community, and he's taken a pretty big approach, a pretty active approach to making sure that this type of tomfoolery is not happening at these different locations. So good on him for doing that. Now, what I want to finish up with before we get over to Mr. Jimmy Jenkins, who should be joining us in about 10 minutes or so, is an update on how the coronavirus is spreading throughout Arizona prisons. This is something that obviously we're very passionate about. We practice law in Arizona. We want to keep an eye and see what is exactly going on here. So per Jimmy's article, and he released this article 2 days ago, Monday, April 20th, and then he updated it on that night. And he says that the coronavirus spreads in Arizona prisons. Now, he's done some, truly amazing work on this. I don't know where this guy gets his information. He's so plugged in. He'll be here shortly, hopefully, and we'll be able to ask him some of that stuff. But he's got really good numbers. He's just really plugged in. And so one of the things that he keeps tabs on, because this data is hard to decipher, he actually says that 28 inmates at 4 different facilities have tested positive for coronavirus. And so he goes through the numbers. Arizona Department of Corrections has only tested 0.35% of its total population. So we've got 28 inmates, and we've got who definitively tested positive, and we've got 99.65% of the rest of the population who needs to be tested. So obviously there's been a lot of really bad information out there across the board, not just related to the prison population and people in jail who've been diagnosed with coronavirus. I just mean across the board. Face masks are good. Face masks are bad. Coronavirus is like the flu. Coronavirus will decimate your entire family. There's been a lot of noise in this entire ordeal. And Jimmy has done a really good job of deciphering it. So he's actually finding data that it feels like to me the government doesn't necessarily want out, but he gets it and he brings us to our attention. So I had asked Faith to take a look at some of the numbers, and she did an amazing job. She put together this graph here, and she says as of April 21st, 2020, total inmates tested were 172. And Jimmy is very prolific on Twitter, is very good at that. And he said, so still just 4 prisons with positive cases, but there are now pending tests at Florence West, Phoenix, Safford, Yuma, 18 confirmed cases, and another 16 pending at Florence, which continues to be the hardest hit. And so there are a lot, there's a lot of activity going on. And then the question is going to, become, is it containable in a location like a prison or a jail? When I was a couple weeks ago, we had on Andre Norman, who was was an inmate. He was there for many years. He was something like the highest in sort of the prison gang rankings when he was in there. He was in there for many years and got out. And when I was asking him about this situation, he was really his answer was kind of surprising. He said, "Oh yeah, no, you're kind of in the safest place in the world if you're in a prison or in a jail, because it is its own little quarantine." And I understand that perspective, but the issue is then if it does breach that border, if it does go into the jail, into the facility, well, then it's kind of just like a ping pong bouncing around in between a confined group of people. You've got inmates sharing cells. You've got sort of unified, everybody eats together, everybody exercises together, everybody does things together, and so they can't leave, they can't get medical care, they can't isolate themselves. So just from a practical logistical standpoint, it seems like this would rapidly spread through the prisons. And that has been the case in other places. Like I said, I talked to a lot of criminal lawyers around the country, and that has been sort of the consensus that this stuff, once it gets in, it expands exponentially very rapidly, and it's very difficult to contain, which is why the criminal defense lawyers in Arizona, myself and others, have been sort of just beating the drum, like, can we get these people out of custody? What are we doing here? Why are they sitting in there? We know that many of these people are nonviolent offenders. Many of these people have been accused of convicted of drug crimes, which, in my opinion, require a lot more, treatment or self care and rehabilitation than it does any sort of punitive measures. That's not what's going to solve that person's addiction problem. We need to connect them with people. We need to get them some support and some treatment, not throw them in jail. So it made total sense to me to get more people out of custody, put less people into custody. But so far, Arizona has really, really been lagging on this. I don't know why the governor is so sort of opposed to this issue, other than it's just a political, it's a political issue. It's all it comes down to. Arizona is a pretty conservative state. We've got a lot of law and order type people here who, just really sort of bristle at the idea of any challenge to law enforcement or our prison complex. And so there would certainly be a backlash if we started letting people out. But I just don't see a situation where we let out nonviolent offenders, people who are convicted of drug offenses, and we suddenly slip into chaos. It doesn't make any sense at all. So back to Arizona prisons, we do have an idea of sort of where these are coming from. So we've got another breakdown that Faith put together. These are the testing numbers. These are the negative results, the positive results, and the pending results. And again, if you're on Instagram watching the slides, you're not going to be able to see here because it's a one-direction camera, but head on over to YouTube or the Facebook group Watching the Watchers. So you'll see here on these numbers that some of the prisons are harder hit than others. Jimmy said that the Florence complex was obviously a lot worse hit. 77 tested, 18 of those positive. So that's a pretty big percentage of that overall population. And still, there's a lot pending, and there's a pretty good portion that's negative. But I mean, testing in other complexes is just, it's like non-existent. I mean, these are just such small numbers. 77 tested, 11 tested. 22 tested in Tucson, 11 tested in Marana. I mean, it's really, really low numbers. And you would think that if you're concerned about ensuring that when it does get in, it's already in the prisons, if you're concerned about really, preventing the spread, that you'd really want to ramp up your testing, but that is obviously not what's happening. Another interesting thing I wanted to ask Jimmy about when he hops on here is this other tweet that he had released. And so I'll sort of tease it right now, and then maybe we can ask him about it. But Jimmy Jenkins shared this tweet. I'm not sure when Faith pulled this, may have been today. This is a leaked message from Douglas prison warden to his staff about an employee testing positive for COVID-19, yet AZ Corrections is still refusing to confirm any staff positives or provide any information on staff testing to the press or to the public, which is, kind of bizarre, right? When I was telling you about that story with Andre, he was saying, that it's safe, but if you have guards and you've got people who work at the facility who are bringing the virus in and out on a daily basis, I mean, that's not good. So we've got an actual letter from Ronald Lee to Douglas. So this must mean that it's going to sort of a list in their internal email system that is going to be spread out to sort of a number of different people. So you can send an email that goes to all, right? And it goes to your entire organization. So that may be what's going on here. But here's what the letter says. It says, and good afternoon. Confirmation has been received that an employee at Douglas has tested positive for COVID-19. A contact investigation was completed, and any employees who are identified as being at risk from exposure will be contacted by the OHN and given direction on what action they should take. So if you're not familiar with the contact testing or contact tracing, what that means is that when a person shows positive for the coronavirus, they want to identify everybody who that person has been in contact with. So if this employee was, working with other inmates, was in and out of different cells, now you have to just draw a line from that person, from the employee who caught the coronavirus, to every single person that was in that organization, within that facility, within that office, within that home, within that school, whatever it is. They got to contact trace that person right back to that person. So have they done that? They say they did, but we just don't know because they're not giving us any information per this tweet from Jimmy. Please remember, stay at home when sick, covering coughs, blah, 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 all the same stuff. Prohibit handshaking while wearing a mask or face covering. Staff should make every effort to avoid touching the mask. And if they do, blah, 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 blah. Fold it, wash your hands and so on. So what's important about this email is that it's not what you're supposed to do. We all know that. I'm so sick of hearing these politicians and these people tell us to wash our hands and not touch our face. We get it. We got it. The Governor Ducey was just on today, and he had his press conference for a solid hour, and the first 30 to 45 minutes of it were all about washing your hands and staying safe and don't touch your face. It's like, we got it, guys. We need more information. What the hell are we supposed to be doing with our businesses? What are we supposed to be doing with the people who are in custody? What are we supposed to be doing with our courts, with our cases, with our clients? What let's get some actual information. What you're telling us to do with wash our hands and stay inside, like, we got all that. You guys are being less than useless. So how about we get some new talking points out and you tell us a little bit more information? That's what you were elected to do. So let me just pause real quickly and see where Jimmy is. He was going to be around here at 4:30. Now I know that there was just a press conference, so if he may have gotten held up there. And let's see here. I may be in the wrong Zoom meeting, so that is probably my fault. Let's see. So let's just hop over here and see if we can get Mr. Jimmy on the line. Apologies on that. Yeah, we do have Jimmy there. So I apologize, Jimmy. I was on the wrong meeting, but I should have patched you in here. And yep, there we go. So how are you today, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and
Okay.
clear. It's so great to have you here. You know, I've been a longtime follower of you, and we've never had the opportunity to speak. So that's, it's pretty great that we're able to connect. Did you get a chance to listen to any of the show up until this point?
I did not, but I was on hold, but I read through the talking points, so I have an idea of what you spoke about.
Awesome. So yeah, we're live now, and I just wanted to kind of get a take on an update from you. So I was explaining to the audience, and I apologize for the technical problem, but I was explaining to the audience, I have the slides that I'm going through. You can't see any of that, but I've said, you are so well connected and plugged in to all of these different data providers that every time you tweet, you've just got this new data that I haven't heard from anywhere, from any sources or anything like that. So I was just hoping, if you could just kind of give us an update on sort of what you're seeing. I know we just got done with Ducey's press conference. I didn't see any real new information that was actionable there at all, which was disappointing to me. But I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around, what's going on with the prisons, what's going on with the jails, what's going on with law enforcement, and you seem more plugged in than anybody. So I'd just love to kind of get your take on what's going on.
Well, like I get a lot of information from attorneys, so attorneys are a valuable source of information. So it's not just me, but the most recent thing that just happened, the Department of Corrections just updated their daily website. So now we see that we have 35 total positives for COVID-19 across 4 different facilities. A lot of them are at the Florence prison. And if anybody out there wants to monitor this, you can go to the ADC's website now. KJZZ actually started doing this, and then ADC started doing it as well. So now they actually have a lot of data that they're sharing online about inmates. You can just go to their website, and it's one of the big banners, and you can click on it. They seem to be refreshing it every day about this time. So what we've seen, though, is a big increase recently in positives among inmates. But what I and several other reporters have been complaining about is that we can't get any information about staff testing. And as that's how this virus is getting into these confined facilities. That's just the nature of how it works. It's the people in the outside world bringing it in. So it would be really helpful to the press, to the public, to know those numbers, but we can't get those. So while they are being somewhat forthright about where the positive testing is happening, we don't know anything about the staff. And kudos to Dave Biskobing from ABC 15. He is able to, and I've been able to work with some of the correctional officers unions, but even these people are just guessing. So it's frightening to think about how many staff are exposed to this, and we just don't have enough information about that.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me because you can deal with the people who are infected, but if you have staff who keep bringing this thing in over and over and over, there's no possible way to quarantine to mitigate that. So why are they being difficult with this information? Is it do you have an idea?
Yes. Well, so I'm able to access a few different Facebook pages or groups that the correctional officers post in, and they're all pretty forthcoming about their worries and their concerns privately. And I think part of this is from the administration. They don't want to cause panic within the staff. That you probably already know that we're already very understaffed in Arizona prisons. We don't have enough correctional officers just to work the schedules that they need to have. You need to have a lot of people to have yards open, to allow people to just go get their food or go get their medicine, and we don't have that now. And we're learning from the correctional officer unions that lots of people are calling in sick. Hundreds of people have been turned away because they have these conditions. So I also know that they're not putting that data out there because they just don't have it. Like correctional officers have told me they have to go get themselves tested at the hospital, and then it's just kind of up to them whether or not they would tell work. And you probably wouldn't tell work because you selfishly probably just want to get better and then go back to work so you don't miss out on your pay. So it's just like all these awful combinations of things coming together. But as far as the lack of testing, I think they just don't have the tests. This new information I just got from Correctional Health Services. They just told me that for all of the jails in Maricopa County, the fourth largest jail system in the United States, they just have 200 test kits right now. And, they told me just this week that they've gone from about 7,500 to 8,000 people every day in the jails. Now it's down to around 5,500. But I mean, still just 200 tests. So if we extrapolate that out, if ADC is having the same amount of trouble, I bet they just don't have the test. I can't get them to tell me though. We contract out to a private healthcare contractor called Centurion Managed Care, and they won't release how many tests they have to me at each prison. ADC won't tell me, but I think the numbers are so low because we know that they're not testing still less than 1% of the whole population. And I bet they're not testing because they don't have the tests, unfortunately.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. I was going through some of the numbers. Faith put together the sort of a synopsis of the status of everything, and a lot of it's based on what you do. Your numbers, which are awesome, and thank you for the amazing work. I kind of skipped over that. It's really really good, really insightful stuff. And I was shocked at how low the numbers were. Right, like only 77 people were tested out of the whole facility.
Right, and now I think we're at 172 total. So again, that's like 0.33%, not even 1% of the whole population. The thing I think is weird too is that like they haven't tested any of the female population. Perryville keeps showing 0 tests, and I'm in a communication with a lot of people that live there, a lot of their families. They're all freaked out. They're all worried. That's something I'm not really able to report on. That maybe this is a good venue to talk about it. It's just that like I get every day, all day, I get concerned emails and phone calls from people who have loved ones in there now. And I mean, I really think it's bad. I think it's really bad. And I can't confirm any of that, but these people don't have any reason to make this up. They're just telling me what is happening. And they're like, Jerry called again last night and like everyone in his dorm of 200 people is coughing. And so, it's just, I think it's going to be really terrible. Some modeling actually that backs this up. I just interviewed these people from forward.us today. They put out this really scary model that I think is going to be shown to be accurate, and we're going to air it tomorrow. But basically, they think that almost like 99% of people in our prisons are going to be infected with the COVID-19. Many of them will be asymptomatic, but the problem is that once it gets in, they did special modeling for like jails and prisons.
Yeah.
And what they've determined is that, it's just going to affect like all of them. And they're predicting 360 deaths on the low end. And what's really frightening is they think that there's going to be a need for something like 1,600 hospitalizations. So there's only 4 prisons with infirmaries across the whole state. And those beds right now are mostly full. And an infirmary has like 2 or 3 beds, maybe, so it's not. So yeah. All these people are going to need treatment out in the community. So, I mean, even if you don't really care that much about incarcerated people or whatever, you don't have a loved one that works there, I really think this is going to be a big issue out in the communities because they're going to have to come out to us for help and for treatment. So it's going to back things up in the hospitals.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, there's so many problems here because it seems, a confined jail where you've got a lot of control over a body of people, a sort of a population that you really can do whatever you want with that population. You would think that would be sort of the ideal condition to prevent something like this happening. Like that's just your right. You've got the ability to stop stuff from coming in. You can test everybody who's at that barrier. And that's just not happening. Do you had mentioned sort of that this stuff is going to trickle out into the general society, into the population. A lot of people are just not concerned about the jails and the prisons. Like you said, they don't have anybody in custody. They don't have anybody who works there. I've made the point many times on this show that, those people don't deserve to die in there. Many of those people are not in there on life sentences. They're there for a year. They're there for, 6 months, 4 months, some people. and they don't deserve to die for that. And so, our responsibility as a society is to, they entered into a contract with us. They're going to serve this punishment. We're going to let them back out and reintegrate them back into the society. And if we don't uphold our end of that bargain and we just kind of abandon them, that is a huge sort of crack in our entire justice system. That's my perspective on it. But, you're on the ground doing the hard work, and, why not a lot of reporters are on this stuff. So I'd love to learn about why you're passionate about it or how you got into this really specific niche, because you're really good at it.
That's very kind. Well, my family, I have a lot of law enforcement actually in my family, but they always taught me to be, probably because I come from a small town in Indiana, and those officers, my father included, taught me to be compassionate for the people that were coming into contact with the law. Like, he kind of saw himself, and I think as a last guard of officers who were there to like save the day. Like, he hated writing speeding tickets. He liked showing up and like saving people or just providing comfort. Whereas I think you have a lot of frontline people in the criminal justice system now who have a different take. So I was raised in kind of like, I was with my dad sometimes when he would have to go to a call, and it's awful. It's that person's worst day of their life, and oftentimes it's like just a stupid mistake, or how this is with
Totally.
working with your clients. So I mean, I was just raised in like, this is not good. People should not have to come into contact with the criminal justice system if they don't need to. And then, but the thing most recently in my career that got me into this was I just started following the Parsons versus Ryan prison healthcare settlement, which allowed me to go to federal court once a month and just learn about the prisons for all day, like 9 hours. So it was like this master class, and Chuck Ryan would take the stand, argue with the judge, all this crazy stuff happened. He's a former prisons director who was kind of forced into retirement. And so I started getting piecemeal learning more and more information about the Department of Corrections, and just seeing how combative they are with people that try to get information out of them, and just seeing how important an institution they are. So another reason I always try to put out there, if people don't think they don't care, $1 billion of our tax money goes to the Department of Corrections every year. And we have one of the highest incarceration rates in the country, and it's very costly, so we're always talking about we need money to go to different parts of government. I mean, if we locked up less people, if we had less prisons, we wouldn't be spending as much money. But I was able to see the humanity of the people who would actually sometimes come in and testify, because this whole lawsuit is about how they're not getting decent healthcare. Basically, they're getting awful healthcare. And, you'd have sad old men and women coming in, that look like my grandparents, who were in there for like fraud or something for 20 years, or because, they stole a credit card, which not good, but like this, I started to see the sentences that people were getting.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I realized, like, these people are mostly not all violent criminals, and the people that are in there are just being treated so poorly. So I just couldn't help but develop even more compassion for them. And since then, I've just made friends with a lot of people who have incarcerated loved ones or who have been in prison. And I just think it's underreported. So it was like something that drew me to it anyway, because not a lot of people were talking about it. I think people are coming around now, though, and they're seeing the value in calling attention to this. If anything else, just because we spend so much money on it, you'd think we were at least getting a good product. Like, we're going to spend $1 billion a year. The product that we're getting is not good. Like, the people aren't really coming out with a lot of resources or training. I mean, a lot of them have to come right out and they're homeless, so it's just a messed up system. I guess that's one of the final things that drew me to it, because I think it does need a lot more attention.
Yeah, you're right. Where in Indiana are you from?
I'm from a place called Terre Haute, Indiana, which is where there's an enormous federal prison complex there. And we used to drive by it every day on my way back and forth from school. And it's actually where they put a lot of like high risk. It's these people that are allowed to have like no contact with outside society. They're like considered terrorists and everything. So, but we also have many nice colleges and universities there as well. But we do have a lot of prisons and jails there as well.
It's funny. Your story is very similar to my my business partner. He's also from Indiana, Greenwich or Greenville, or one small town back there, and he's also from law enforcement family. His mom was a detective out there, and she was working on sex crimes and all sorts of stuff. And my story is not dissimilar. I went into law school wanting to be a prosecutor and wanting to do justice and fight for the law and put the bad people behind bars. And when you start interacting with these people, you realize they're good people. You know, they're just like you or I. They're fathers, their mothers, their family, and they just had one bad night. But that doesn't justify them going into custody and potentially dying or getting really, really subservient, subpar, healthcare. From your perspective, have you seen, so, what I covered on some of the earlier stories on the show was some movement from other parts of the country that are doing the compassionate release, that are, letting people out. In Arizona, I have not seen or heard any rumblings of that. It's been pretty hard. No. Is that what you're seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even the ones that you think would be a no-brainer, like as I was looking into this, I found out that there were these 5 people who had been approved by our Executive Board of Clemency, which Governor Ducey appoints. They had all been approved by this board. As you probably know, it's a very thorough process. You go through 2 different things. Everyone comes in, the victims come in, everybody's like, but the point is that someone in the Department of Corrections has decided that this inmate has like 4 months to live or less. And so at that point, you can apply to be released based on your imminent death. And so I found out that there was 5 of these people, and they had all been sitting on the governor's desk. And one of them, Douglas Fields, has been there since December 12th. So, I mean, unfortunately, he's lived longer than his grim prognosis. But Governor Ducey hasn't signed any of these papers. And these are people that his handpicked people. They went through it all, and I assume they've probably made some political calculations too and decided, this person's not going to harm anyone. It's okay. They're not going to be a burden to society. They all had to prove that. Anyway, these 5 people who you would think would be a no-brainer, he wouldn't sign them. He signed 3 of them after we published a story, and some other people brought attention to it as well. But 2 of them are still there. And so, he told me point blank at a press conference that he was not releasing inmates at this time. No one has asked.
Governor Ducey told you that?
Yeah, and this was 2 weeks ago. No one has asked him. No one asked him today. I didn't get a chance to ask him today. But so yes, there does not appear to be any desire or movement. The director Shin told 2 different lawmakers, he's the director of the Department of Corrections, that he was not going to use any of his, he has powers as the executive person in that agency to do things, I think, like furlough, or, he could find a way. There's always a way, and just no one's talking about it. So I think what it's going to take, like we've seen in other states, is you're going to have to see a higher infection rate, and there's going to have to be people die, and then they're going to be backpedaling. And what people like Forward and the ACLU and other groups are like clamoring for now is just like, we're ahead of a spike in the prisons right now, we think. So release people now, because you need to get that population density down. That's like the only way. And the other thing that is sad about this is that the Department of Corrections has identified 6,600 people who are, based on their age and their underlying medical conditions, very susceptible to COVID-19. Like, we know who they are. And so that you could start right there, huge impact, and you could go through them maybe if you wanted and look at like different custody levels and see what people are in there for. But there is a list, and it doesn't seem like they're even reviewing the possibilities. So I think it's going to take bad things happening before any action happens, unfortunately.
Did the governor give you any indication as to why that decision is being made? I mean, the only thing that I heard was from the his spokesperson, who said, like, no, we're not even thinking about it. It's not going to happen. But there was no basis for it.
Yeah, I have no idea. I would only be speculating. And other people I've spoken with who are like, political whisperers and advisors are just telling me that it's probably just you don't want to look like you're soft on crime, and you don't want to look, and there's the risk of you let somebody out and they do something bad. We shouldn't be highlighting that in the press, but I'm sure a lot of people would. So, maybe that's going on through his head, but it's at some point, the executive needs to make the decision that like the risk to me politically is going to be worse keeping these people in than it is letting them out, So I think it's just going to take that. Yeah, no, I'm not getting an inkling at all from anyone that he's considering any releases.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And I'm sure it's just political. Like a lot of this, a lot of everything that we're seeing is, sort of under the guise of whatever excuse that, that they want to justify. People are making up a lot of reasons for doing a lot of things right now. And it kind of seems like a no-brainer to me. It's frustrating that they're not doing that. It's good, I think, that that you and Dave Biscobing, he's another guy I follow. There are a couple of you, Meg O'Connor is really good on
Yeah.
kind of holding law enforcement accountable. And there's kind of a select few journalists out there who are doing really, really great work. I wanted to ask you about that specifically because I know that journalism is sort of teetering right now. I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's like a major problem, and I'm not plugged into that space at all, so I have no idea what's going on. But I know that a lot of the New Times people are not around anymore. They all got kind of let go. Can you talk about that at all? Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can talk about my newsroom is fortunate right now. We have a lot of conversations about the climate that we're in. We are public radio is mainly dependent on people who are giving us their money in like $5, $10, sometimes more increments every month, and we call them our public radio members. So we are fortunate in that we do, and then as everyone knows, we do those things where we call them member drives, where it's like all you hear for a few days in a row. But we've had years and years of interacting with people and trying to ingratiate ourselves into their lives. They feel like we're a part of their life, and we are. So NPR just put out the Washington Post just put out a story. No, Wall Street Journal put out a story about national NPR saying they were preparing for cuts, though. So that's not good. I think just the overall thing right now is that everyone's cutting back on giving, and they're cutting back on things that aren't essential, like you would. I mean, especially 22 million people. I mean, I can tell you right now, if I lost my job, I would first start looking at the things I donate to. I get that. So I think we're not going to be skipped by all this. But anyway, my newsroom's doing well right now, and we're so thankful for everyone who is stuck with us. And then, yeah, I have friends and colleagues at the other papers in town. I think a lot of what played into some of that is, there's been a lot of labor negotiations and not negotiations going on. I think it seems like people were in a place where they were already looking for other jobs. And then, yeah, there's been the furloughs at the Republic. I mean, that's just devastating. I see a lot of my friends and colleagues tweeting about like, oh, well, I can't write this week. I'm just at home, So I don't know what else to say except that, like, I hope the public realizes that every time one of these people's furloughed or let go, we all suffer. I mean, we're at a point right now where everyone that's in journalism is really good because you've had to like fight to stay in it right now because there have been cuts for so long. And I mean, there is really no fat to trim at this point. There wasn't in the first place. And it's sad. Like, I've been out here for 5 years now, but everyone talks about how great the Arizona Republic used to be. I've always thought it was a great paper, but everyone tells me like, there used to be hundreds more people working there. Like, I can't fathom the impact they could have had and the watchdog work that they were doing that we're losing now, so it's just tragic. And I hope if people do have expendable income, I hope they're still supporting their local newsrooms because it's important. It's the reason I have a job. It's the reason all these people have a job. And if you have a bias or whatever where your money's going, I would ask you to donate to the nonprofit newsrooms like mine first, just because all the money that comes in goes directly to reporting, and no one's taking a profit or it's not leaving Arizona. So we're just fortunate that hasn't happened to us yet. But it's a really scary, sad time right now. It seems like every day one of my friends is like, "Oh, laid off."
Yeah, and I'm noticing that. I mean, I follow some of the people I mentioned. I've seen some changes, and what struck me about the whole thing was really sort of the speed at which it all happened. They declared the national emergency, and then like it felt like a week later. I don't know what the actual timeline was, but all these people from one of the big ones, I think it was the New Times with Meg O'Connor and some of these other people, get these letters that we're about ready to let you go. And I just thought, man, that was really strange. It was really quick, like too fast. There certainly there were still people spending on ads. Nobody had enough time to cancel everything yet, but they just started, lining up these journalists and putting them on the chopping block.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what terms that they all left either, but didn't seem like it was planned. And a lot of them posted, this stuff publicly that they, that it was kind of abrupt. So yeah, we're only forced to believe that, or forced to speculate that something happened that they didn't know was happening. But because of a lot of the contract negotiations and things that have been going on there and at other branches, I think a lot of people have been looking at other options. All I can say is everybody's freaked out right now. Everybody's scared about job security.
Yeah.
So I just try to keep a positive attitude about it, but it's tough. It's a bummer time because we need the information now so badly, and you need it from so many different outlets. It's good that like we're all able to compete against each other because we want to like all vet the information, and it's good that there's more journalists because you'll get more pure fact, hopefully, at the end of the day.
Right. Well, I mean, it's critically important because, you know, we're defense lawyers and we're in court and we're in that segment of this whole process, but we don't have, you know, the resources, the time to go and just hold these people accountable, to go to these press conferences, to hop on these calls, to send these emails, to blast them on Twitter, you know, constantly. And that is critical. I mean, the data, the information is so important. Had your reporting not come across my desk, I wouldn't have these numbers to report to our audience and spread the word. And I think with a little bit more community involvement, maybe we can lean on the governor to say, you know, look, you got to do something here because this is only going to get worse.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I hope that the reporting that we do just informs people more about what is going on and gives them more insight about the government that they have control over. Yeah, definitely. And with respect to what you said about attorneys too, I mean, you know, attorneys are my best and most valued sources. You all are the ones that are right there working in the system. And so I think a lot of times it's reporters working with attorneys that generate the best stories because you all are the front line of the legal system. You know exactly what's going on, and journalists can help put that information out there in a digestible way. Speak with your clients, speak with other people out in the community that shows why it's impactful. So there's a definite partnership there that I think is beneficial to the public. And yeah, if reporters go away, then those stories of injustice don't get told so loudly, and then they just kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and it's difficult. People are concerned about, you know, what's inside their own hula hoop, not what's outside of their hula hoop right now. And I can understand that. I can empathize with that and relate to that. But you know, this is something like you had mentioned earlier, and I didn't even really think about that. If they do bring them out, you know, they're going to have to take them to the society's hospitals, to those beds, and that may displace some other people. And if you've got a prison system with thousands of people that suddenly boom get it and they need that treatment, that could be. You know, Governor Ducey was on today talking about, well, we've got all this capacity in our hospital beds. Well, that could be eaten up really quickly if you just get this big, you know, bubble of people all immediately infected.
I think it's the report or the interview I just did with the Forward people. They estimate that the baseline is like it would take up 12% of our hospital beds statewide if what they're saying, if what they think is going to happen. And I wanted to mention too, I thought of, I spoke with former Attorney General Grant Woods last week, and he was a kind of one of the people who put together this letter calling for releases. And I said to him, you know, is this an opportunity maybe to get some reform going? And he said, yes. He said, he thought for many years that we have just been too carceral of a state, put way too many people in prison. He especially called out for, you know, I think he draws the line at violent crimes, but he said, you know, we put too many people in prison for things like marijuana, low-level drug offenses, nonviolent drug offenses. And he said that he thought maybe this is an opportunity to clear out some of those people that never should have been in there in the first place. So, and, you know, he is something, I guess, of a centrist now. He left the Republican Party. The other people on his letter were mainly Democrats. But, you know, I do think that there is bipartisan support for this from different people. A lot of people who used to be in positions of power, like former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, two of them, they signed on to this letter basically saying, hey, Governor Ducey, please release like several thousand people or else this is going to get really bad. They even said like, you know, they called out the safety aspect. Like if it gets super bad, we could have unrest in the prisons and make things even worse. So I do think there is broad support for releases, but I don't think that it exists in the governor's office right now and not in the Department of Corrections. And I don't know what it would take to change their mind, frankly.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't know either. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world to me that they would do something. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to go all the way. We don't have to release everybody, but some of the people that you identified, those 6,000 plus people, well, let's start there and let's just see what we can do to get them out, because they're obviously going to be the ones who need the hospital beds more than anybody else.
Yeah, I just got a letter from it was co-signed by 200 different inmates, and they live at this place called the Marana Community Treatment Facility. And right now there's 437 of the people living there, and they already have 6 positives, which is more than most of the other prisons. So they all wrote to me, and they're like, and this, I looked this up and talked to several of their attorneys, but they really are all minimum custody, nonviolent inmates, and a lot of them have not a lot of time left on their sentences. I mean, we literally have like huge blocks of the population already kind of sorted into their custody levels, where I think you could do it. I just think there needs to be a will. But like, there's an entire facility of people where it looks like it's going to get bad there, and we could let them out, or at least help them reduce their density. I think maybe what the task will be to me and other journalists is to continue to call attention and write about other states where they're doing this and where it's not causing panic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even the option to, I think, furlough is you're released home, but you're still like on home detention.
Yeah.
Or at some point, if this ever goes away, you may actually be called back to prison. But there are, to finish your term or whatever. But there are a huge list of ways to, I think, safely decrease the population. So I think it's up to the press maybe to keep calling attention to those efforts, and then not calling attention to like when that one random person who, guess what, probably went into prison with mental health and substance abuse problems, never got any treatment, and then they get out and, oh, we're also surprised when they do something awful again. Like, of course, that's going to happen every now and then. So it's the job of the press to not like wave those stories around and make a big deal out of it, and keep things like in perspective, because I just want what's best for society. And I think this is what's best for society right now, is to reduce this population so that, especially there's 9,000 state employees that work in the prison,
right?
And they're all scared to death, and they all have families. So I mean, I want them to be healthy and safe. We need them to be, because we do need someone in there watching things, making sure that we can separate people from society while they need help and treatment. And so, yeah, I hope that they figure out a way.
I think a lot of people don't realize how big of an operation our prison system is. They just don't understand the scope of it. Like you said, 9,000 people. Those, that is a big operation. I mean, that is a massive deal. And they all have families, and they're all concerned about it. And so I agree with you. I do think that it is imperative that the press, be responsible about it. I did see an article about something that you described, in Florida. So it happened, and somebody covered it. And of course it's going to happen. And that's not an excuse in my mind to not take action, to do something for the people who are still in custody.
Yeah. And just sort of tied to that, another thing I'm working on right now that I find fascinating, that I think is educational about the system, is that I'm hearing from more and more people that they're being released right now from Arizona state prisons, and they're getting dropped off at like vacant strip malls, in like the far-flung reaches of the valley. And they get limited resources when you get your gate fee or whatever, which is, I mean, usually like $200 or less, and you have it on like a stupid card. You don't even have like cash or anything, so you have to figure out all this stuff. Anyway, I think that a lot of these, we're not even, the people that we are releasing, we're not doing a good job helping them transition back into society. So again, when you do hear those stories, oftentimes it's our fault. Like we didn't get the right system in place to help them ease back in, or else if you can't find money, then you're going to go do what you did to get money before. So we have to.
They get preyed upon all the time, and we hear stories from our clients who get released. This is without coronavirus, COVID-19.
Yeah, right.
This is, they get released out of 4th Avenue jail, and they've got no money, they've got no phone, everything's dead, phones are dead, everything. They're just like, good luck to you. And then you've got these cab drivers who are out there charging $150, $200 to take you somewhere, and they'll give you the ride, but they're going to sit in your parking lot until you bring them a credit card or you bring them some cash. And so it's just like every which way, and then they're charged with the crime, and their mugshots on the internet, and you can't get it off, and we got to fight all these people. So it's like, once somebody is in that hole, it is really, really difficult to dig out of it. So of course you're going to have people who do that, but that's, like I said, not justification to just, house them like caged animals and let the virus just rip through the system.
Yeah, true. I agree.
Yeah. So the last question that I wanted to ask was, how can people support you? So you mentioned, specifically that you've got some donation programs and you've got some member program things and basically, where can people connect with you? Where can they sign up for that? How can they follow you on Twitter? I just want you to kind of, give people some next action stuff.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. Well, I would just say I would encourage everyone to, if you're not a listener, start listening to KJZZ as a part of your day. 91.5 KJZZ Public Radio, FM Phoenix, and HD. You can even go on your website and just Google kjzz.org, and we come up, and you can listen live for free. Put it on during the day when you're at the office or at home, and we have live news on the hour, every hour. They're still making it happen. But that's always been kind of like the thing I liked about NPR is I knew if I ever want to figure out like the most important things that are happening right now at the top of the hour, I could turn it on the radio and I'll hear like in a 6-minute segment, state and local, what is going on. And you also have we have one of the biggest newsrooms in America as far as NPR affiliate stations go. So we have a huge team of local reporters. So it won't be just stuff out of DC. Like you get a lot of content from all of our places all over the valley, and we even have bureaus in other cities. So it's a huge asset that's already out there for you. So I would just say, if you're not a listener, check it out because it's an awesome resource. I used to be a member of the production team, and we launched a daily show that we still have now. So that's from 9 to 11 every day. It's all curated local content. It's just great interviews. Like, it's just going to be the hosts talking with the smartest and most important people concerning whatever the issue of the day is. And I can tell you, when I was a part of that team, we really did make a big attempt to, okay, is this a partisan issue? Is this an issue where there is valid different points of view? The mission of our team was always to just bring in the brightest and smartest people, from both sides, and let each of them speak their piece. So, I mean, I really do think, and we have a strong, our metrics show that we have a really bipartisan listenership here. So I would just encourage you to, if you've heard anything about NPR or you think it's biased one way or the other, I would encourage you to just check it out, listen to it for a few days. And then if you like what you hear, then yeah, you can go on and become a sustaining member. A lot of people do $5 a month. And that, if like, I think they figured it out, if something like half the people that listen to us just gave $5 a month, we wouldn't even have to do those silly member drives anymore. Yeah. But they are effective, and it reminds people that like, oh, hey, we do need your support. So if you like what you hear, I would recommend that you please become a sustaining member. You can do it. You can do $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever. But it's like a monthly thing, and you don't have to worry about it. And then for me personally, they can contact me. I am at Jenkins at KJZZ.org. That's my email. And then I'm on Twitter at NewsJunkieJimmy, or just Google Jimmy Jenkins. And I do try to maintain, like right now, the main projects I'm working on are updating the COVID-19 stuff in the prisons. We have like a map for that. I post every day when there's an update. And then a big thrust of mine has always been prison healthcare issues, calling to light things that are impacting the incarcerated population. I'm working on a story right now about mental health in the prisons that I've been working on for many years. So, if you're interested in that sort of thing, but mainly just I would direct everyone to go to the website, and thank you for the opportunity to do that, because we just have a stunning array of different journalists covering all kinds of different things. And we're fortunate enough that we're all still working. So we need your support at this time. So thanks for allowing me to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm happy to do that. I didn't know about the sustaining member program, but I'm absolutely going to sign up and contribute to that, because I seriously love your work. You're doing amazing things. I'm so happy that we got to meet. I appreciate you taking some time to, hop on this show with us. And, maybe when restaurants open back up, we'll go grab lunch or something.
Hey, I would love that. That'd be great. Thank you so much. It was really great talking with you, and just thank everyone for listening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. You take care. Have a great night, and we'll stay in touch. Everybody, that was Jimmy Jenkins. That was from KJZZ. Really good guy, as you can see. He's really plugged into this stuff, and I learned a lot about him today. I didn't even realize that part of the reason why he does what he does is sort of his background, and so it's kind of nice to hear the rest of the story there. But amazing work. Follow him on Twitter if you're not following him. I get his alerts. I set the alert. And so ding, I hear from Jimmy all day long. So really cool guy. Check them out. Support them. I know that we will be doing that here at our firm. And so that leads me to the next part of our broadcast, which is, of course, everybody's favorite part of the show, really. And it is the Bad Popo segment. The Bad Popo segment. That's right, folks. We've got a lot of bad hombres out there, a lot of bad popo, and they're just bad people masquerading as good people. They're running around with their badge and their gun, and they are causing a lot more chaos and a lot more trouble for our judicial system. So now let's dive into them. We got three of them. The first one I want to talk about is a fellow named Eric Smith. So Eric Smith is somebody who was actually a bad prosecutor. So we call them bad pros. And this person is a Cobb County prosecutor, Eric Smith. He turned himself in to the Michigan State Police. He actually reported himself, and this was 4 days after being charged with 10 crimes that accuse him of running a criminal enterprise. That's a prosecutor, folks. Eric Smith, Macomb County prosecutor, is accused of running a criminal enterprise. He was booked with 10 felonies, with 5 counts of embezzlement, and a couple single charges, running a criminal enterprise, tampering with evidence, conspiracy to commit forgery, misconduct in office, and accessory after the fact. So this is somebody who was actually putting people in jail for those types of crimes. The real question is going to be whether or not any of those cases get reopened. So this guy was very clearly unethical, committed many, many crimes for a long period of time, and now he finally turned himself in. So, you know, how many people has he put in jail for those types of crimes? I don't know. How many of those are never going to be looked at again? Probably all of them. They're probably not going to get looked at because the prosecutor's office is going to say one thing has got nothing to do with the other, and we're just going to leave it at that. So we're not going to do any further investigation. We're just going to prosecute him and leave it at that. So what did he do? He actually used the money for a personal security system for his house. He used it for country club parties. He used it to pay campaign expenses. He used money to buy flowers and buy makeup for his secretaries. So that's what this guy's doing. He's alleged to have been embezzling over $600,000 since 2012. So he's been doing it for about 8 years. 600 grand has just been getting siphoned off the top and going to his personal stuff, including makeup for his secretary. So he was arrested, and he resigned shortly thereafter. So he is no longer going to be prosecuting people anymore. We're going to be very curious to see what the state bar does with his license. So of course he's a licensed attorney, and if you are convicted of a lot of crimes involving moral turpitude or dishonesty, that may mean that you're going to lose your license and not be practicing law anymore. So we'll see. You know, Michigan, look at that. He's got a Michigan police badge right on there. Eric Smith, Macomb County prosecutor. Eric Smith, you are a very bad popo, very bad bad prosecutor. Next up, we've got another fellow. This guy comes from our backyard, and his name is Dana Thornhill. So Dana Thornhill is from a very small town in Arizona called Sierra Vista. And Dana Thornhill was arrested for charges of sexual conduct with a minor and sexual assault. So this guy was a U.S. Border Patrol agent. Dana Thornhill, Sierra Vista, arrested Border Patrol agent on a charge of sexual conduct with a minor, sexual assault. These are the guys that we put in charge of protecting our border, and they're certainly in a law enforcement capacity. This guy, a little bit more on his story. Police say they had been investigating him for investigating 49-year-old Dana Thornhill, who is a special agent with the U.S. Border Patrol. He's suspected to have been involved in continuous abuse of multiple children. Thornhill fled the Sierra Vista city limits and barricaded himself in a church with a handgun. Officers took away his Border Patrol credentials, and after the arrest, they searched his home. They found additional evidence linking him to the crimes. We're probably going to see some child pornography, maybe, or other sex-related crimes. Some evidence from his misconduct, from his criminality. Thornhill was booked into the Cochise County Jail, and he was held without bond. That's what happens when you're arrested for sexual assault. You cannot get out of custody. It's a very serious offense. It's a very serious charge. You're basically held without bond. absent some very, very extenuating circumstances. So he faces 2 counts of sexual conduct with a minor, 2 charges of sexual assault, which is essentially rape, and it could carry up to life in prison sentences. So this was somebody, who was very thoroughly vetted by our law enforcement agencies, by the U.S. Border Patrol. Don't know what his background is. He may have been, present in other law enforcement agencies. Who knows? But the point is, this guy's out there committing some very, very heinous crimes. Dana Thornhill, the U.S. Border Patrol agent, arrested for charges of sexual conduct with a minor and sexual assault. Pretty serious charges. And Dana Thornhill, you are a very bad popo. Very, very bad. That type of stuff is so disgusting. It's difficult to work on those cases, but it is important. So of course, these guys are entitled to their defenses as anybody is entitled to their defense. My problem with these types of people, they have sworn an oath. They have set themselves to a higher standard. They're supposed to be the purveyors of justice, not the people who are breaking it under the color of a badge and gun. Prosecutors, they get a prosecutor's badge. There's all sorts of special rules for prosecutors. You can't do certain things or communicate with them, or the penalties are a lot more severe if you're doing anything that is sort of offensive to a prosecutor. So, they have these special rules. They've got these special blue lines and these privileges that they're always adhering to. There's own little cultures within their communities. And then they're out there breaking the law more than anybody is, and in ways that are extremely heinous, extremely egregious. Sexual conduct with a minor and rape. I mean, those are about, as bad as it gets. So Dana Thornhill, bad popo, hope you get what's coming to you for violating the public's trust. Now, the big story of the day, the worst popo of the day, we turn to Meridian, the Meridian Police Department out of Idaho. You may have actually seen this story. Meridian Police Department, mother arrested in Meridian, Idaho for letting her kids play in the park. Now, before I dive into the story, I want to sort of preface it. This is all unfolding very quickly. There are 2 sides to any story. Of course, the police just released their statement. I'm going to try to pull that up if I can, or I'll have a Faith pull that up. But they just released a statement, and they are explaining their side of the story. But before we do that, I want to show you the actual video. So this was posted on Twitter, and Miss Faith was able to play it here. But we have here a mother arrested for letting her kids in Idaho play in the park. So let's take a look at the video.
Being arrested, this mother. You gotta be kidding me. Why? Wait.
Move out of my way.
Wait, where are your kids?
Can't play on the playground? As a person, does this make sense to you? As a person, not as a police officer, as a person, does this make sense to you?
This mother is being arrested for being in park with her kids. Letting her kids play in the playground. Being arrested.
Name or badge number as we speak.
She doesn't have a mask on her clothes!
Can we please get out of
You cannot arrest her.
Anyone in Meridian, any of our centers available.
You can't arrest someone for being in a park.
Right now.
What you're doing is illegal.
She was standing in a playground, right? You arrested her.
All right, so
Being arrested, this mother. You gotta be kidding me.
So you can see there that there's a lot of people who are very upset with that. I think rightfully so. People are asking, does this make sense to you as a human being and not as a police officer? Of course, the cops, they just move on by. So the woman who was arrested, her name was Sarah Brady. She was arrested on a misdemeanor trespassing charge. This all happened when a group of parents were actually staging a peaceful protest. So they were out there on a playground. There were some warning signs. Basically, the governor, instituted a lockdown. This is all happening in Idaho. I don't know anything about Idaho COVID-19. I don't know about their numbers or anything like that, but they're on a pretty strict lockdown. They locked down the park, and the parents said, no, look, we're not having that. We're going to go out. We're going to take our kids out. We're going to go to the park, which makes sense to me, right? You're talking about social distancing. You're talking about CDC guidelines. You want people to be healthy. You want people to be sane. There's nothing like getting outside, getting some good sunlight, jacking up that vitamin D, feeling good, getting some energy, getting some fresh air. I think we should have more outside, less being cooped up inside with other people. And so they were doing that. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, so don't, take what you will of that, but they're out, they're having a good time with their kids. They're sort of protesting and saying, we're going to be outside. And we're seeing more and more of this around the country. We had protests in Arizona. As I said, I don't know that it is the best idea to be congregating with a bunch of other people, but the problem here is that these are adult human beings. They can make these decisions. They have the ability to decide their level of acceptable risk. If these parents want to go out to a park and play with their kids, they're entitled to do that, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people, the counter to that is, well, they could be spreading this and infecting this and all of those different things. I understand that. And that's why we have to balance these two major concerns: the public health, the public safety versus our individual liberties and our individual freedoms. And so really, regardless of where you fall on that scale, wherever you balance those, the question that we got to ask here is it a good thing to be arresting a mother who I think has 4 children with her children there in the middle of a park, in the middle of the day for being there? Is that the right response? I certainly don't think so. She said that she was handcuffed. She was led away in front of her children. Police had originally asked her to leave. They were asking her questions, and it sounds like she was challenging them, saying that you're going to arrest me for being difficult. Go ahead and do it. I'm not leaving. They told her to leave. She said, no, I'm not leaving. And they said, all right, cool, we're going to go ahead and arrest you. After her release, she went out and joined another protest outside Meridian City Hall. So she's angry about it. She's rightfully, entitled to her freedom to protest and go out there and make her voice known, in my opinion. I don't think it justifies a crime in any sense of the concept of it. But that it is. I mean, technically, she's been charged with a crime. She's been charged with trespass, and so she's going to have to deal with it. I think it's probably going to get thrown out. I don't know that a prosecutor is actually going to sink their teeth into this one, but they may. You never know. They may want to make an example of this person. I'm sure these 2 officers radioed in to their superiors and asked them how to handle the situation, and they decided to arrest her. So you saw that video. She comes out. The cops, they are being their, heroic selves. Here's this woman, and they're slowly putting her on in the handcuffs, and they're slowly walking her over to the car. And there's a number of other people there who are shouting at these officers as they're going by. They're asking them, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this happening? You're just coming here and arresting a woman and you're going to throw her into jail? It doesn't make any sense. And when we think about, even just from a logistical standpoint, right? The idea of being in quarantine is that you're around less people. So on a daily basis, let's say, pre-corona, pre-COVID-19, you're out there and you're at your office and you probably speak with, 10 to 20 people a day, depending on how big your office is. You talk to, the people coming in, people coming out. You probably keep your circle to about 15 to 20 people. The idea of quarantining us is that we're going to reduce that down significantly. We're going to reduce it down to our, from 15 to 20 down to, 5 people. Everybody in our nuclear family, everybody who's living in our residence with us. So what the cops are doing now is they're going to arrest this woman. So she's now had physical contact with 2 officers, neither of whom are wearing any gloves, we can see. So they're not following CDC guidelines. They've got no gloves. They've got no masks. They are just, out there just like everybody else is out there and making an arrest. So now this woman goes into jail. She's going to be housed with other people who've been arrested. So her contact sphere is going to be much bigger. These cops, their contact sphere is much bigger. This woman's going to go through the entire criminal justice process, meaning she may have to consult with a lawyer. She's going to go to court. She's going to be in a busy courtroom with other people. And what ordinarily would have probably been a 5 to 10 people kind of contact day is probably going to, she's going to be talking to hundreds of people as she goes throughout this entire process. And so it doesn't make any sense from just a pure mechanical perspective. If we want to reduce our contact spheres, the police have just really amplified hers and theirs, quite frankly. But more importantly is what happened to her. This is somebody who I don't know what her criminal record is, whether she's got any other priors or not. My guess is probably not. Most people don't. She's out there, speaking her word, doing what she thinks is is appropriate under the circumstances, and she gets arrested for it. She's arrested in front of her children. She's now going to face criminal charges. She's going to have to go through the criminal case process. So her life is going to be, upended for a while because these cops decided that this was something that was appropriate for them to do. Put this woman in handcuffs, take her in front of everybody, because that's, I guess, what they've been ordered to do. I mean, I don't, you have to ask yourself as an officer, is this what you're out to do? Is this why you went into law enforcement, to go and arrest women in parks, to kick people off of bus stops and arrest, all sorts of different things that we're seeing throughout the country are very, very gross. And law enforcement is not helping the case. I mean, I get concerned now about this stuff happening because these officers, you can tell, it's funny. They all look the same, by the way. I'm looking at this picture. Don't they all kind of look the same? I mean, all these guys, it's like the same body type, the same kind of haircuts, the same hats, the same expressions, the same glasses. And, they've just been doing this thing for 15 to 20 years. So they're just used to just following orders. They just go there and they just say, yeah, you're not cooperating with us. And so we're going to arrest you. And they're just following orders. But, I can't imagine that you would go into law enforcement thinking that a great day at the office is arresting, women who are protesting, playing at parks with their kids. It's nuts to me, but that's the society that we live in. Now, I want to read the law enforcement's response because, of course, there are two sides to every story. We have a lot of this on video, and so I think more of this will come out as the story unfolds. But the article, so the Meridian Police release a statement, and they say, after receiving several calls, police responded to the park. Upon arrival, officers saw that the metal signage caution tape around the playground enclosure was removed. They observed numerous individuals gathered on the closed playground area. Officers informed that those gathered that this was closed and they needed to utilize other areas of the park if they chose. After being told to leave the playground multiple times, 40-year-old Susan Brady, Meridian, refused to leave and was arrested for 1 count misdemeanor trespassing. Meridian officers made several attempts to help Brady adhere to the rules. She was non-compliant and forced officers to place her under arrest to resolve the issue. She was arrested for trespassing. So that's what always happens. These guys, they have very, very frail egos. So when they go to somebody and they say, oh, hello, I'm an officer and I have legal authority to tell you to do something. If you say, no, I'm not going to do that. I actually think that the First Amendment, the freedom of assembly, freedom of association, my ability to be on a public park where I am a lawful citizen, I'm not in violation of any legitimate laws. I pay my taxes. I'm entitled to this park as much as anybody else is. And I think that these orders are unconstitutional, unlawful, and I want to support the reopening of our local economy and our local government. It's a pretty reasonable argument. But if an officer hears that, they just say, are you refusing to obey my commands? Are you refusing to obey my orders? And they just immediately moved to the arrest. So, from their own statement, they made several attempts to help Brady. She was non-compliant and forced the officers to place her under arrest. So it's her fault for their stupid arrest. They're going to make the situation much worse. They're going to bring down a lot of heat on their on their department, and rightfully so. I mean, I think these guys are bad popo. This is not a situation where you just follow orders on these types of things. Why can't we have one cop, one officer, one police chief, one politician ever stand up and say, you know what, this is wrong. Like, we understand that we're law enforcement. We understand that this is a trying time, and we're just not gonna make these arrests. Why does that not happen more? Where are these guys? I never hear from them. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. When Faith and I are doing show prep for this show, it's almost comical at how difficult it is to select the bad popo that we want to highlight. Our list is like endless. Every single day, it's more bad popo everywhere we look. And we're going to see a lot more of this type of stuff going on. So people around the country are absolutely experiencing a lot of unrest. They're very concerned about their future. And so we're going to see more protests. What is law enforcement going to do? Are they going to continue to make these arrests? Are they going to wise up? I mean, at some point, I get very concerned this is going to break down into something that's worse. We talked to Jimmy Jenkins. We talked to Andre Norman. We talked to a lot of people on this show, and everybody's kind of concerned that there's a boiling point that's taking place, that law enforcement is treating all of this stuff, everything that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, like it's their personal Vietnam. Like they're out there every day suiting up. Look at this one officer. I don't know if that's a beer belly or a vest. I don't know what it is, but they're out there thinking that they're in the middle of a war zone. Like this is Fallujah, and they have to go take these women into custody and arrest them. Or these people who are protesting at city halls and things, but cops are going to people's arresting people from their cars. They're arresting pastors of churches. They're just really clamping down on people, and these are things that are very very important to our freedom and to our democracy. If you are not allowed to worship the way you want, if you're not allowed to hang out with the people that you want, if you're not allowed to go out in public and do things that you want, I don't know what kind of country that is. Now, I understand at some point you have to have certain limitations for public health and public safety, but it's also, I think, way crossing the line to start arresting people for these basic things. This is not criminal behavior. This is not what the criminal justice system is meant for. This woman should not have been charged with a crime, and we shouldn't be discussing it. But that's unfortunately what we're dealing with. So that's the Meridian Police Department. Now, her arrest has sort of really galvanized a lot. People are really angry about it. So within minutes after the arrest, protest erupted at Meridian City Hall, idahonews.com. So she gets arrested. Everybody rolls over to the city hall and they say, this is ridiculous. They're going to protest it. When the news station caught up with Sarah, she said she was singled out. She did acknowledge that she may have asked too many questions, which is, it's a nice acknowledgement from her. She understands, that there was some confrontation going on there, and the cops decided to arrest her. It's ridiculous, but it's generally a pretty good rule to follow. If you start arguing with a cop, they don't know what to do. They just malfunction. So anytime that you're stopped by a law enforcement officer, or you're in a in a vehicle in a traffic stop situation, and you sort of break protocol, the cops are used to people saying on a daily basis, yes, sir. No, sir. I'm so scared of you. What can I do? I'm sorry. I'm shaking and I'm crying. And so whatever I can do to make this go away. That's how people just genuinely respond when they're dealing with law enforcement. So when you get a woman like Miss Sarah Brady, who is saying, I'm not leaving here. This is a park, man. I pay taxes for this thing. I'm not adhering to this nonsense garbage that's going on. Cops, they don't know what to do. They just malfunction. Their head spirals out of control because they're used to sort of paint by number operations. So they just probably called and said, we've got somebody who doesn't want to leave, and the lieutenant or whoever they spoke with said, you just better arrest him. And so these good order following men just went back and they arrested a woman in front of her 4 children and took her into custody. So the incident went viral. It went nationwide. Clip from a Facebook post that says, a bunch of us are going out there. We're going to tear down these things. So people are getting very angry, and I don't necessarily, blame them for that. I would be very angry. I was talking to some other people here, if that was my wife and my kids, well, I don't have a wife or kids, so I can't really, relate as though I had. But if it were, I can imagine I would be very, very, very upset about that, about what happened. And, as this continues to go on, as there's this battle between the public and the police are continually escalating these things, they're making these arrests that are nonsense. People are going to be very upset about it. And I just don't like the idea that this is boiling up, because people get killed that way. And it's the cops who do the killing in most situations. They're shooting people who, in my opinion, just don't need to be shot. So we're going to keep an eye on all this stuff. Obviously I have a lot of concerns. I'm a small government. I'm a limited encroachment. I'm a fundamental, freedom and liberty loving type of individual. And so when I start to see these things, I get very concerned about it, as are a lot of people. So I want to applaud Sarah Brady. We've got some bad popo here. She is not one of them. The other 2 guys, let's see, we don't actually have their names is part of the problem, but we are going to call these guys bad popo. Both of them are very bad popo because they're just following orders. They're not doing the right thing. They're just out there just going through the motion. So I don't know who they are. At some point, we're going to get their names, and then we're going to add them to the list of the bad popo, of the bad hombres out there. Bad guys masquerading as good guys. You can see her. She's hand just ripped behind her back and just throwing handcuffs on them. So we got some bad popo out of the Meridian Police Department in Idaho. If you've got some issues with that, send them a letter, give them a phone call, repost this video, share this video, tag somebody about it, because really the only way that we're going to see some changes here, you heard it from Jimmy, is the public's got to get engaged. We have to get people engaged in this process. Too many people just sit around and think, well, I don't commit crimes. I don't know anybody who commits crimes. So what does it matter to me? Well, it matters to you because this stuff is creeping. This stuff is trickling down. This stuff will impact your life. This woman was not doing anything outrageous. This woman wasn't drinking and driving or using drugs or beating somebody or committing domestic violence. She was peacefully sitting in a park and she got arrested for it. And this is not a one-off incident. People are getting arrested in their cars outside of churches. Pastors are getting arrested. So why are we allowing this to happen? We as a public are a check on that power. We have the ability to write to our governor, to write to our police chief, to write to these people and say, look, this is not how we want our society to be run. And if you're not going to make some key changes, we're going to throw your ass out of office. And the culture just needs to shift from top to bottom, which is why we do this show. It's watching the watchers so we can hold guys like these people accountable. And with your power, with your help, with your voice, by you sharing this show and by you joining us on a weekly basis to make sure that you're up to speed on the news and you're involved in our cause, in your cause, in society's cause, in America's cause, in justice, then we'd love to have you here. And we'll be back here next week as well. We've got another live show scheduled 1 week from today on Wednesday. It is the live Watching the Watchers show. If you have not already done so, head on over to our YouTube channel and subscribe over there. You can get there by going to RRLawAZ. RRlaw.tv is really going to be the place. We've also got a Facebook group if you may be watching there, but it's called Watching the Watchers. It's on Facebook. And then, of course, follow me on Twitter, Robert Gruler, ESQ, if you're there. We've got some cool stuff coming up this week. We've got some cool projects that we're working on, and I can't wait to share them with you next week. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch you on the next show. Take care.